begin. First of all, Israel wiped out a substantial amount of the Yemeni Houthi leadership, and we'll see something on that. It's been frustrating over the last year watching Yemen, the Houthis send a rocket every week, sometimes 2 or 3 a week, and Israel shoots most of them down. They missed 1 or 2, and then Israel comes back and shoots rockets, takes out their oil fields, but they're not doing like they're not doing. And I had said to some people it may be that they just did not perceive, as with Lebanon, Iran, Gaza, that Yemen would be a hot spot, and perhaps they had not yet really gone to the effort of setting up Mossad in Yemen the way they have done with Mossad, so they might not have intelligence on the ground. So this past week, if that was correct, if my guess was correct, it seems they now have intelligence on the ground. There was a speech by the national leader, and while he was delivering a speech, his entire cabinet met in an underground bunker to watch the speech together. And Israel bombed that bunker, and they wiped out most of the cabinet. And there's still 2 or 3 of them left. The next one Israel knocked out this week was the chief spokesman for Hamas. Every single thing that happens in the last 2 years, this guy gets up and holds the press conference the next day. Chief spokesman for Hamas. And when they kill somebody big, he's the one who makes the announcement. And they noted, but Netanyahu this morning noted that when you kill the chief spokesman for Hamas, so far there has not been a press conference to announce it. There's been local anti-Semitism both in America and throughout Europe, and we see those when we get together. And there are some interesting things. And we'll be closing with 5 minutes of a comedian to kind of change the mood, so we leave in a good mood rather than disappoint, depressed by the bad stuff. We're going to end up in a good mood. There are 2 or 3 very uplifting things this past week. Again, Germans, volunteers who came to Israel, and some other stuff. So let's get going. In America, this is Labor Day weekend, so let's make it Labor Day. There we go. And you could find it on YouTube, or you could email me and I'll send you the link. In it, I discuss primarily these 80 non-Orthodox, so-called Orthodox rabbis who criticized and attacked Israel this week.
Listening to Talk Line with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981.
And we're back. It's been a while, but we're always glad to have Rabbi Professor Do Fischer, Esquire, with us. He is a Vice President, Coalition for Jewish Values. He's a retired professor of law, senior editor, American Spectator. You can find him on Road Sheva, but I'm inviting him to our program because of an article he wrote on the Times of Israel, dealing with 80 Orthodox rabbis that said Israel should have more clarity and provide more humanitarian aid in Gaza. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much. Always good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So you are upset with 80 mostly modern Orthodox rabbis that came out with this letter calling for the Israeli government to have moral clarity and to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. So tell us about why you're so upset. They made pains not to condemn Israel and also to attack Hamas, didn't call for a ceasefire, but yet they want more humanitarian aid in Gaza.
Well, I think there are a few issues at play. First of all, the very way the sentence that you began with, 80 Orthodox rabbis, they're not Orthodox rabbis. Very, very few actually are Orthodox rabbis. It's
Rabbi Yosef Blau, who organizes it, went as Mashgiach Ruchni of was Yeshiva of Yeshiva University. You went to why you had interaction with him. He certainly qualifies as an Orthodox rabbi, but who spearheaded it.
Absolutely. Yosef Blau had been a spiritual counselor at Yeshiva University, and there were several maybe there were 20 Orthodox rabbis there. The others were people from the so-called open Orthodox movement. There were women rabbis, gay rabbis, rabbis that are in gay relationships. These things they're not rabbis. They're not Orthodox rabbis. I mean, let's say a reform rabbi, I've always said a reform rabbi is a rabbi. You don't take away the person's certificate. If a school says you came to our school and you met our requirements and this is the title we give you, if they give you a title of rabbi, you're a rabbi. But an Orthodox rabbi, no. So I wanted to, first of all, although they portrayed themselves as 80 Orthodox rabbis, there were approximately 20 to 30 Orthodox rabbis. And if they did not include another 50 or so women rabbis, gay rabbis, etc., if they had not included them, the number would have been so palpably small, even though 80 is also a small number. Now, the letter itself was one that, Israel does not need, at this moment in her history, to have Jews pile on and attack with everyone else. She's under attack from France and from England, and Zev better than I, from Ireland and from Spain and just all over the world, not to mention the really bad guys like North Korea, Russia, Syria, China. I mean, Israel's under attack from everywhere, Australia, Canada, all these so-called progressive governments that have kind of just jumped on her. And then she's got to deal with some of the Jews on the far left who attack as well. And then there are those in the American Democrat Party. And when you start going, and then there are those on the right wing woke, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. And when you start looking at that whole universe, there comes a point where there's that et tu brute, like even you, for a moment, I can't even turn my back on Jews that portray themselves as Orthodox. Even you guys are coming after me. So there's that. Within the family, sometimes within a family, you keep it within a family. And if you have issues with others in the family, you can honestly say so. Really, really strongly, but you keep it within the family. And you don't need to put it out there in the open, even if they were right and they were wrong. Now, why were they wrong?
Okay. Are you saying because he's rabbi?
So that's just a little sense of what went on. If you want more, we'll do that. But here we go. Every Saturday night, there is a rally in Tel Aviv. They call the place Kaplan Square, Hostage Square, Rabin Square, whatever. And the leftists they can't win an election. They've been losing elections for the last 30 to 40 years, more or less since Menachem Begin won in 1977, except for 2-year or 3-year blips in between. And so there's an election. The right wing wins, Netanyahu and his coalition. And now you've got 4 years of every Saturday night, a demonstration against the government. And they just change the subject every week. They just change the signs. So if the government's trying to push judicial reform, so it's 100,000 people against changing judicial reform. And if the government is this and the government that, so mostly lately, they're demonstrating they want the hostages free, as though the government does not want the hostages free. Channel 14, as I've told you in the past, is the only voice of sanity. The entire deep state in Israel and the media of far left, extreme left, like MSNBC. And what you have is, in Israel, there's the, like NPR is Channel 11 or PBS. And then there's Channel 12 and 13. And then all the newspapers, all left-wing, except for Yisrael Hayom, Israel Today. And I just want to show you the split. The Channel 14 reporter is trying to report from the rally, the weekly rally, and this is what goes on.
תל אביב, אנחנו איתך, מילנה אמר.
כן, מגי, אז כפי שאת רואה, האירוע הזה שהיה אמור להיות למען החטופים הפך להיות פוליטי לחלוטין. אנחנו כאן מנסים לסקר את האירוע ולהעביר אותו למען החטופים, אבל המפגינים כאן שהגיעו לכל סיבה שאינה חטופים לא נותנים לנו לדווח.
200,000
מארגני המחאה מדווחים על כ-200,000 איש כאן בכיכר, אלא שבמשטרה מבדיקה שערכתי מדובר ב-15,000 איש בלבד, וכך נראית העצרת כביכול למען החטופים.
מילן, אנחנו לוקחים מכאן לצערנו את השידור, כמובן שנחזור אלייך בהמשך עם התמונות האלה, ואם באמת נתעכב על התמונות האלה, יערה, יחי ההבדל הדק בין חופש המחאה לאנרכיה, אין דרך אחרת להגדיר את זה.
אני לא מצליחה להבין, יש לנו, תראו, החטופים פה זה קונצנזוס, כולנו רוצים מאוד.
يا الله يا الله الحمد شركة النفط الآن بتضرب سيم زوال وبد نزل نزل يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله شباب يا الله يا الله الحمد شركة النفط الآن بتضرب شركة النفط الآن لعنة الله على بلد أبوه.
Does believe the Houthi terror group's entire cabinet was killed in a strike in Yemen Thursday, including the prime minister. Israel's Channel 12 reporting the assessment is preliminary, adding that it appears the Houthi defense minister and military chief of staff were there at the time of the explosion. That's just one of the topics that we are following out of the Middle East here.
In the aftermath of Israel knocking out just about the entire political cabinet and military leadership of the Houthis, this was the million-man march that came out. So just understand, everybody in Yemen, it's like Gaza, there's no innocent civilians.
الشعب بشوق وسرور الشعب بشوق وسرور الشعب بشوق وسرور الشعب بشوق وسرور يترقب ميلاد النور يترقب ميلاد النور.
We used to do this on the bus in day camp, make up crazy things, and then you had to repeat it.
يترقب ميلاد النور يترقب ميلاد النور لن يصلح للأمة شيء لن يصلح للأمة شيء ولن يصلح للأمة.
We were like 9 or 10 years old, and the goal was to make the bus driver for the camp bus crazy. So that's what Israel has to deal with. In Yemen, they're all crazy, and they're all on that side. They're all with the Houthis basically, but they're so far away that if Israel is able to stop Iran from supplying them, we'll just keep knocking out their leadership. That pretty much neutralizes them, as Israel already has pretty much neutralized Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the previous Syrian government, and is working to try to neutralize Hamas. And okay, that's what goes on. Let's continue.
Got breaking news out of Gaza. An airstrike at a hospital has killed at least 19 people, including 4 journalists. That's according to Palestinians.
Now, first of all, it's according to Palestinians. So there's no such thing as Palestinians. So there's no such thing of what they're reporting. Now, the hospital is Nasser Hospital, Nasser. Nasser Hospital has been in the news ongoing for 2 years since the war broke out. It's a hideout for Hamas. We've been covering, you may not have been focusing on Nasser Hospital, but we've been several times in the last 2 years covered Nasser Hospital, where Hamas has headquarters in tunnels underneath the hospital, and they have their own Hamas people in the hospital operating as command centers in the hospital. And the attack on Nasser Hospital last week killed 6 Hamas terrorists. Yes, it was a hospital, and yes, Israel has apologized for accidentally killing some other people. And this is the problem in a situation where you've got a war where Hamas hides among civilians. Hamas uses human shields, and Israel has to make a decision. We're not going to hurt anybody behind whom Hamas is hiding. So Hamas wins the war. End of the war. Go home. Because we can't hurt anybody. Because every single guy in Hamas is either hiding in a tunnel underneath a residential building, or underneath a hospital, or underneath a school, or underneath a mosque. So you may as well give up. And you can't shoot them in the street because they put some woman in front of them, often their own wife or their own child. In this case, they went once again after Nasser Hospital, and accidentally some other people also were killed, including 4 journalists. Usually, these so-called journalists are in on it with everyone else. But let's assume they're actually legitimate, innocent, objective journalists. We don't even have objective journalists in America. But let's imagine that this AP freelancer was an objective journalist. So it's an accident. It happens. It happens. You're in a war zone. You're in the central command center of Hamas. It happens. So you don't go there. But you were sent there. If you want to take a dangerous assignment so that maybe you'll win a Pulitzer Prize, gesund to hate. But what do you expect?
And health officials. One of the journalists killed was a freelancer who had been working for the Associated Press. Al Jazeera and Reuters have also confirmed their journalists and freelancers died in the...
Al Jazeera, some of their people were involved in October 7th. Not just journalists. Al Jazeera, some of their journalists were among the people who made the incursion on October 7th, killed people, and took hostages. That's Al Jazeera journalists. I mean, understand what we're talking about. Just because it has a nice AP, Associated Press, the journalists of Gaza are not the same as the journalists who cover a Frankfurter a hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July in Coney Island.
strike. Israel's defense forces responded to the reports, announcing plans to conduct an initial inquiry as soon as possible. It adds, the IDF regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists as such. The IDF acts to mitigate harm to uninvolved individuals as much as possible, while maintaining the safety of IDF troops. Jonathan, what more can you add to this?
Yeah, so this is from Reuters just now, a few moments ago. It's a developing story. Things are still fluid, but Reuters also confirms that one of its journalists, a man named Hussam al-Masri, was...
All right, enough of that.
Earlier today, IDF troops carried out a strike in the area of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. We are aware of reports that harm was caused to civilians, including journalists. I would like to be clear from the start. The IDF does not intentionally target civilians. The IDF makes every effort to mitigate harm to civilians while ensuring the safety of our troops. Any incident that raises concern in this regard is addressed by the relevant mechanisms in the IDF. We are operating in an extremely complex reality. Hamas terrorists deliberately use civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, as shields. They have even operated from the Nasser Hospital itself. Hamas began this war, created impossible fighting conditions, and is preventing its end by still holding 50 of our hostages. Having said that, as a professional military committed to international law, we are obligated to investigate our operations thoroughly and professionally. The Chief of the General Staff has instructed that an inquiry be conducted immediately to understand the circumstances of what happened and how it happened. Reporting from an active war zone carries immense risk, especially in a war with a terrorist organization such as Hamas, who cynically hides behind the civilian population. As always, we will present our findings as transparently as possible. We regret any harm to uninvolved individuals and are committed to continue fighting Hamas while taking all the necessary precautions.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu apologized for a military strike on a Gaza hospital. 5 journalists died in the incident, as well as rescue workers who were responding to an earlier strike.
The IDF is investigating what the Prime Minister is calling a tragic mishap. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
The Prime Minister's office released a statement that said, in part, Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser Hospital in Gaza. Israel values the work of journalists, medical staff, and all civilians. Our war is with Hamas terrorists. Our just goals are defeating Hamas and bringing our hostages home. The IDF said an investigation is underway.
As a professional military committed to international law, we are obligated to investigate our operations thoroughly and professionally. The Chief of the General Staff has instructed that an inquiry be conducted immediately to understand the circumstances of what happened and how it happened.
Defram added that the IDF faces challenges in fighting Hamas.
Reporting from an active war zone carries immense risk, especially in a war with a terrorist organization such as Hamas, who cynically hides behind the civilian population.
I think we do need to place this in a certain context, and that is the role of hospitals as used by the Hamas organization inside the Gaza Strip.
Jonathan Spire from the Middle East Forum told CBN News how he found out the way Hamas uses hospitals.
As a result of some issues I was involved with last year, found myself in the summer of 2024 talking to a person inside one of the hospitals, Shahada Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. And this person, talking to myself and my colleague in real time on WhatsApp, on our phones, was saying, yeah, I'm in this hospital, we're surrounded by Hamas operatives, there are certain parts of the hospital that we're not allowed to go to because they're for the exclusive use of Hamas. That was an actual eyewitness on the ground telling me that. And I think this fits in with that picture that we know that the Hamas organization very cynically is making use of medical facilities.
Spire says the media often misses this important context.
Unfortunately, I think what we've seen is, certainly in regard of a number of very prominent media organizations, is a willingness to take at face value claims and figures and reports coming out of Gaza produced by the Hamas authority itself or by individuals closely associated with it.
Meanwhile, in the Oval Office, President Trump said he's not happy about the incident, but he hopes the war will be over soon.
I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to have pretty good conclusive ending. And it's a hard thing to say because they've been fighting for thousands of years. If you want to know, that's been a hotbed forever. But I think we're doing a very good job. But it does have to end. But people can't forget October 7th.
On the international front,
When allies become accidental enemies, the US once bombed Britain by mistake. Picture this, World War II, chaos everywhere. It's 1944 and Operation Cobra is underway. The US Air Force is clearing the path for Allied ground forces. But in the fog of war, miscommunication strikes. Bombers release their payload too early. And boom, friendly fire hits British troops in Normandy. Over 100 lives lost in a heartbeat. A tragic, avoidable error. Why? Poor visibility, confused coordinates, and the urgency of war. Animated maps show the mistaken target. Real footage of the aftermath reveals the devastation. The impact? Immediate tension between allies, but also a stark lesson in the price of war. War is chaos, but this was a disaster. What do you think? Could this happen again?
In 1944, a British pilot bombed a Nazi train, but what was inside shocked the world. That train wasn't carrying soldiers, it was packed with over 2,000 Jewish prisoners headed to a concentration camp. The pilot thought it was a military target. Hundreds died instantly. The worst part? The survivors were sent to the camps anyway. A tragic twist of fate that history can't forget.
Meanwhile, Afghanistan says a military strike by US-led coalition forces targeting militants have accidentally killed up to 27 civilians who are on their way to a wedding ceremony. This is the second military attack in 3 days with reports of civilian deaths. Xie Zheng has more.
Local officials say at least 27 civilians were killed and up to 11 others were wounded in the strike. A witness says about 80 to 90 people were on their way to a wedding ceremony when a plane bombed the area. The area of the incident is too remote for officials and reporters to reach and get further information. A statement from the US-led coalition says an airstrike killed several militants in the area, but a military spokesman says there are no reports that civilians were killed and suggested the claims were false. More than 2,100 people have been killed in insurgency-related violence in Afghanistan this year. Xie CCTV.
And more on that story, civilian casualties have caused friction between the Afghan government and US and NATO troops in the past, and have also helped weaken President Hamid Karzai's presidency. Karzai has repeatedly called for better coordination between Afghan and foreign soldiers in pursuing militants and for international troops to reduce civilian casualty numbers.
The decision to provide aerial fires was a U.S. decision made within the U.S. chain of command. A hospital was mistakenly struck. We would never intentionally target a protected medical facility. I assure you that the investigation will be thorough, objective, and transparent.
You'll never forget this guy's face, a face only a mother could love.
هم من فوق ولا هم فوقهم يا ما صرت يا جاي
For 3 years, and he will have our support if he decides to pursue a public inquiry.
Coming.
I was nervous, to be honest. Although I have punted in the past, I've never punted the Cambridge way, and it was great fun. It was great fun, and I just eventually got my balance.
Of the fine salt, partially as well, and then we produce it salt and salt as well. So it's very so
But first, tensions between France and the US are rising as Paris summons the US ambassador to France. This after he wrote a letter to Emmanuel Macron accusing the French leader of failing to do enough to fight anti-Semitism. The French Foreign Ministry says the letter, which was published by the Wall Street Journal, violates international law and notably the obligation not to interfere with the internal affairs of another country. For more on this, I'm joined by Katavan Gorjestani, our International Affairs Editor. Katavan, what exactly is Charles Kushner accusing France of, and how is the French government responding?
Well, in that long letter that Charles Kushner sent to French President Emmanuel Macron, he talks about the dramatic rise of anti-Semitism in France and the lack of sufficient action, according to his word, by the French government to tackle that rise in anti-Semitism. But he also talks about French foreign policy. He talks about the public statements haranguing Israel and the gestures toward recognition of a Palestinian state as moves that are emboldening extremism. He also indicates at the end there, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. He also claimed that in France, not a day passes without Jews being assaulted on the streets, synagogues and schools defaced, or Jewish-owned businesses vandalized. So really painting a very bleak picture of what it means to be a Jew in France today. It is pretty rare for an ambassador to so publicly and so directly criticize the host country where they're posted, and the leader of that country, especially when it is an ally. And so the response of the French was equally strong worded, with the foreign ministry announcing that summon, but also dismissing the allegations, responding to those allegations. They admitted that there had been a rise in anti-Semitic acts in France, but they said that they've taken measures to combat that anti-Semitic rise, saying that they had reinforced security. They also called the allegations unacceptable and pointed, as you said, to that violation of international law, which is that an ambassador of a foreign country is not supposed to interfere with the domestic politics. Rather, they're supposed simply to report back to their country, to the term in that. And so that's why you're seeing this move of summoning an allies ambassador to the foreign ministry, and we'll see what that brings us.
Now, this letter sounds a lot like criticism that we've heard from the Israeli government in the past, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Just earlier last week, Benjamin Netanyahu sent a letter to Emmanuel Macron where he said that your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on this anti-Semitic fire. He also said that it emboldens those who menace French Jews and encourage the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. And it was not just Emmanuel Macron who was the target of the prime minister's ire. You had other countries that have announced their plans to recognize Palestinian statehood, like France did, including the UK, Canada, Australia, who've also gotten a lot of criticism from the Israelis. But what you see in the wording of Charles Kushner's letter is basically the same elements that we've heard from the Israeli prime minister. But it's one thing for the prime minister of Israel to send a letter to a counterpart, to a head of state, Emmanuel Macron, to talk about something that directly involves his country. It's a whole other thing to have a third country's ambassador send a direct letter to a president, and it shows just how much on this topic, on the topic of Palestinian statehood, on the topic of the war in Gaza, how closely aligned the U.S. still is with not only Israel, but also the Israeli government, specifically Benjamin Netanyahu.
Katavan Gorgeous-Stanley, thank you.
It's a fierce attack, an official letter signed by Benjamin Netanyahu himself. The Israeli Prime Minister says anti-Semitism has surged in France following Emmanuel Macron's announcement that France intends to recognize a Palestinian state.
Your call for a Palestinian state fuels this anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas's terror, strengthens Hamas's refusal to release the hostages, encourages those who threaten French Jews, and fosters the hatred of Jews that now prowls in your streets.
In his letter to Macron, Netanyahu called on the French president to confront anti-Semitism and set a deadline, the Jewish New Year, September 23rd. He also cited Donald Trump as an example, describing the US president as determined to protect American Jews. Paris responded firmly.
The claim that France's decision to recognize the state of Palestine as early as September would explain the rise in anti-Semitic violence in France is erroneous, abhorrent, and will not go unanswered.
Emmanuel Macron has promised to recognize the Palestinian state during the UN General Assembly in September. Other Western countries have said they intend to do the same, including the UK, Canada, and most recently, Australia. Israel retaliated by revoking visas for Australian diplomats to the Palestinian Authority, a move Canberra called unjustified.
In an unprecedented diplomatic clash, France has summoned the US ambassador to Paris.
Charles Kushner's scathing letter accuses the French government of failing to protect its Jewish communities. Paris calls it unacceptable, a violation of international law. The transatlantic partnership, once steady, now faces a sharpened public test. France has taken the unusual step of summoning the American ambassador to Paris, Charles Kushner, after he accused the French government of failing to confront rising anti-Semitism. The diplomatic summons, announced late on August 24th, is widely seen as a sharp public rebuke to Washington's representative in France. In a statement, France's Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs described Kushner's remarks as unacceptable and a violation of international law. The ministry said his comments amounted to interference in France's domestic affairs and undermined the trust that should define the transatlantic partnership. The letter at the heart of the row was sent by Kushner directly to French President Emmanuel Macron. In it, the American envoy alleged that Paris has not done enough to ensure the safety of Jewish communities and criticized the French government's position on Israel and Palestine.
Public statements haranguing Israel and gestures toward recognition of a Palestinian state embolden extremists, fuel violence, and endanger Jewish life in France. In today's world, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. Today, many French Jews fear that history will repeat itself in Europe. Parents encourage their children to emigrate. Surveys show most French citizens believe another Holocaust could happen in Europe.
His open letter also mentioned daily assaults on Jewish individuals, synagogues and Jewish schools defaced with vandalism, Jewish-owned businesses targeted and vandalized, anti-Semitic incidents reported even at preschool levels. Reacting to the letter, the French Foreign Ministry declared that
France firmly rejects these allegations and emphasized that authorities have been fully mobilized against anti-Semitic acts, particularly since the October 7, 2023, Hamas attack on Israel. The ministry labeled those acts intolerable but rejected the notion that French institutions had been negligent.
The White House has so far remained silent on the controversy. But the US State Department swiftly backed Kushner, insisting he was carrying out his role effectively.
Ambassador Kushner is our US government representative in France and is doing a great job advancing our national interests in that role.
The summoning of an ambassador is a formal diplomatic sanction, a clear signal of displeasure, though short of breaking relations. For Macron's government, it was a necessary step to defend sovereignty against what it views as an overreach by Washington's envoy. The diplomatic storm has landed at a delicate moment.
Want niet alleen NRC-minister Veldkamp van Buitenlandse Zaken stapte op, ook...
All right, I'll have to translate here. This is a report on what's going on in Europe. Sa'ara Israelit Holland. That because of Israel, the government of Holland just collapsed. Last week I showed you that the foreign minister of Holland resigned. He wanted an embargo. He wanted Holland, the Netherlands, to impose a complete BDS, boycott, divestiture, sanction, embargo against Israel. And certain parties within the coalition refused to go along. So he resigned. As a result, all other ministers in the cabinet of Holland, who are members of the foreign minister's party, also resigned. And they pulled out of the government coalition, which leaves the government without a majority, and they're going to need new elections. And it's all caused because of the Israel embargo that part of the government would not go along with.
Want niet alleen NRC-minister Veldkamp van Buitenlandse Zaken stapte op, ook alle andere NRC-ministers.
Not only did the foreign minister resign, but his entire party resigned.
Ministers geven er de brui aan.
משבר פוליטי בהולנד וכולו.
So there now is a political crisis, all because of Israel.
Made in Israel. זה היה שר החוץ ההולנדי, קספר ולדקאמפ, לשעבר שגריר הולנד בתל אביב. מוביל זה תקופה ארוכה את קו הסנקציות באיחוד האירופי.
The guy who's the foreign minister previously, had been Holland's ambassador to Israel, and he wants a complete embargo.
כנגד ישראל.
Het is heel duidelijk dat wij als Nederlands kabinet hier een heel duidelijk signaal geven aan Israël.
He had announced, we're going to send a clear message to Israel with our embargo. And then he couldn't get it passed.
והנה אתמול מודיע ולדקאמפ על פרישתו מן הממשלה.
Yesterday, the guy confirmed that he quit.
למה? כיוון שלא הצליח להעביר סדרת סנקציות נוספת.
On grounds that he couldn't get the rest of the coalition to pass his proposal.
על ישראל, למשל בתחום אמברגו הנשק.
Specifically, he wants a weapons embargo, and he couldn't get it.
Zie tegelijkertijd ook...
Now, they don't make a lot of important weapons for Israel, but they make some spare parts. That is, Israel uses, let's say, American-made weapons, and occasionally they need to replace spare parts, and they get a better deal out of Holland. Guess they go Dutch.
Ik heb op grond van wat er in de Gazastrook op de grond gebeurt, de aanval op Gazastad, maatregelen voor te stellen.
So he's saying he wants further embargo and sanctions, but the government wouldn't go along with it. They said it's too much.
המעבר ההולנדי חשבה שזה יותר מדי, אמרה לו לא, ווולדקאמפ נאלץ.
So they said no.
ללכת הביתה.
Ik ga nu naar huis en ik ga een ontslagbrief schrijven.
He says, I'm going to go home. אלך עכשיו הביתה, and I will write a formal letter of resignation.
מה שהם כן הצליחו להעביר זה סנקציות על סמוטריץ' ובן גביר, שהם כרגע מנועים מלהיכנס להולנד.
Well, currently we have, he says, one set of sanctions in Holland where we ban Israeli cabinet ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich from entering the country. But this week, he also tried to pass an embargo, and that did not go through. So that's the story. Parties sat down, pulled out of the government. They're going to have new elections.
השבוע הוא ניסה להעביר אמברגו נשק מוחלט על מדינת ישראל.
הפוליטיקה ההולנדית קרואה סביב שני נושאים, ההגירה והיחס לישראל.
That's how they clap in Holland. They bang on the table. That's the traditional way that you applaud or clap in Holland.
ישראל, אתמול בלילה גבר כוחם של תומכים.
Now this guy, you can tell him by his hairdo, Geert Wilders is that incredibly pro-Israel parliamentary guy. He's just amazingly pro-Israel.
ישראל בפרלמנט, וחירט וילדרס הצליח להעביר הצעה הצהרתית שקוראת להשמיד את חמאס, חד וחלק. אבל העימותים האלה יימשכו עד הבחירות המוקדמות בסוף אוקטובר, והשאלה היא איזה זרם ינצח בהן.
So there are going to be new elections in October, and we'll leave it at that for Holland for now.
היממה האנטי-ישראלית.
Now one more, this is a story off Israel TV, Channel 11, their PBS, their government finance station, and Kan 11. And this is a report that about maybe it's time for Jews to start thinking about leaving Germany again. In the past day, anti-Israel, so in the past day, first of all, there was a massive anti-Israel thing in Australia.
התחילה מוקדם באוסטרליה 7 שעות לפני ישראל. מאות אלפי אוסטרלים הצטרפו לעצרות פרו-פלסטיניות.
Hundreds of thousands in Australia gathered for a pro-Palestinian, there's no such thing as Palestine. It's a fake. All around the country.
בכל רחבי המדינה, מסידני ועד פרת, ממלבורן ועד בריסבן.
From Sydney to Perth.
יבשת שכולה התנגדות לישראל.
יש יום זעם כל שבוע פה. כל יום ראשון יש הפגנות.
Every Sunday there are demonstrations against Israel and they close down the city. Every Sunday.
את הסיטי בכל עיר פה באוסטרליה.
Every city. This is a lady named Natalie Goodman of Melbourne.
יש הפגנות אלימות מאוד.
Often they are very violent demonstrations in Australia.
יש לנו פה מפלצת שמאכילה אותה ממשלה פה שהיא מאוד מאוד אנטי-ישראל.
There's a monstrosity here in Australia that is incredibly anti-Israel.
יותר מ-40 הפגנות התקיימו היום ברחבי אוסטרליה.
Today, namely last Sunday, there were 40 different demonstrations against Israel throughout Australia.
350,000 איש בסך הכל נישאות
Altogether comprising 350,000 people.
ברוח הגבית של ההכרה האוסטרלית הצפויה במדינה פלסטינית ואיסור כניסה לפוליטיקאים הישראלים.
Part of the demands are to ban all Israeli politicians from entering Australia.
אולי אלו גם הפגנות שמכתיבות את המדיניות למדינאים.
כבר מה-8 לאוקטובר כאן, הפגינו על מדרגות הבניין האופרה בסידני, וקראו...
This has been going on since October 8th, the day after the October 7 massacre. In Australia, the response the day after the massacre was anti-Israel, pro-Arab.
שם, צעקו שם לדם יהודי.
And they were calling for Jewish blood.
יותר מדי מקרים, זה לא משהו שיכול לעבור על סדר היום כבר. אני חושבת שהשד יצא מהבקבוק וכבר אי אפשר
It seems that the devil, the goon, the ghost, the gremlin has escaped from the bottle and we can't put it back in the bottle.
דחוף אותו חזרה לבקבוק.
אירופה שידעה מספר תקריות נגד ישראלים בסוף השבוע, דווקא היום לקחה הפוגה מן האנטישמיות. היה חשש גדול שהמסעית הזו, שהגיעה למרכז אמסטרדם והיא מדמה את מנהרת חמאס, תהפוך למוקד של הפגנות פרו-פלסטיניות.
יש בדיוק...
Here in Holland, there was a truck that came to Amsterdam, parked in the center of Amsterdam, and people can write whatever they want on the truck, and the person is saying, this is a tunnel truck. This is for the other side, to give you an idea of what a tunnel looks like, an Arab terror tunnel. So this is a pro-Israel street demonstration. The truck parked in the middle of the street, and for people to see, here's what a terror tunnel looks like.
מנהרה כזו בתל אביב, בכיכר החטופים, וכשהייתי שם אני אמרתי דבר כזה נורא חשוב להראות דווקא מחוץ לישראל. בתחילת המלחמה אני מסתובבת עם המנהרה בהולנד ובבלגיה.
So she says they did this in Tel Aviv, and then she says when I saw that, I said we have to do it in Holland and Belgium.
זה פעם ה-22 שאני נציגת המנהרה, הפעם שוב באמסטרדם, והגיעו הרבה אנשים והרבה תמיכה.
אבל בסופו של דבר ההפגנות שכנגד נותרו רחוק יחסית, קרוב יותר לתחנת הרכבת בעיר. המשטרה דאגה שלא תהיה קרבה בין האירועים, והפעם המצעד הישראלי למען שחרור החטופים עבר בשקט יחסי.
יש עכשיו כמות של משטרה כל כך גדולה שהם לא נותנים לאף אחד להתקרב באמת. אז אין התקלויות, יש פה ושם דיאלוג עם אנשים שהם...
So she says this prompts people to come to look and there are dialogues.
כן רגועים, אבל הכל עובר בשקט, אנחנו ממש...
But everything's peaceful and everything's quiet.
יש לא מיצג פוליטי פה, אנחנו מנסים להילחם נגד האנטישמיות, ולהעלות לתודעה ש...
We're trying to fight antisemitism here, Amsterdam, and this is one of our methods.
אנחנו סך הכל רוצים את החטופים שלנו בחזרה.
שאי אפשר להגיד על מה שחווה הפעיל היהודי סשה סטבסקי וחבריו בעיר פרנקפורט בגרמניה בסוף השבוע.
Now, at the end of the week, there was another thing in Frankfurt, Germany.
3 בסך הכל באו לתלות פוסטרים של חטופים, זה התפתח לעימות עם פעילים פרו-פלסטינים, לדחיפות וכללות, בסוף להשלכת צבע אדום.
And this did bring out some violence in Frankfurt, where I guess they threw paint on the sky.
שכיסה את הפעילים היהודיים, יותר עלבון מפגיעה פיזית. אבל סשה אומר לנו היום, אני שוקל לעזוב את...
And the guy says, you know, I'm thinking of leaving Germany.
גרמניה.
I don't see a future for Jews in Germany. That is the sad truth. I don't see a future for Jews anywhere else outside of Israel. If the hate gets too strong, if the threats get too strong, it is sad to admit that they will win by making us leave this country.
ובתוך כך לאחר התפטרותו בסוף השבוע של שר החוץ ההולנדי בגלל שלא הצליח...
And then the story as far as anti-Semitism throughout Europe. So we covered Belgium and Holland and Germany, and it wraps up talking about the guy we just covered in the previous story, the foreign minister of Holland who had shut down. Okay.
Begin tonight with the latest on a daytime stabbing at a grocery store in the city's West End.
This is in Ottawa, Canada.
Incident leaving a woman with critical injuries and shoppers shaken. It happened at the Loblaws at College Square on Baseline Road around 1:35 this afternoon. CTV's Austin Lee joins us now with the details. Austin.
Now, Patricia, we're learning that the woman who was stabbed in the produce section of the Loblaws is in critical condition, and police have arrested one suspect at the scene. There is an increased police presence in the area tonight as the investigation continues. We know firefighters and paramedics assessed and treated the victim inside the grocery store before she was brought to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Police say there is no active threat to public safety. Still, the attack is leaving many on edge.
I'm surprised. Loblaws, like, who'd have thought? Scary. It's scary. I mean, I've been coming here for years. I never had a problem.
It's very, very sad, It's just sad that somebody was stabbed. Loblaws is usually safe.
Police have not said whether the victim and suspect were known to each other, and the suspect has not been identified. There is now a sign in the door at Loblaws indicating the store is closed for the rest of the day, and we have not received an update on the victim's status. She has also not been identified.
Ottawa police are now investigating a recent stabbing attack of a Jewish woman at a grocery store as a hate crime. The woman is in her 70s and is now recovering in hospital. The suspect has been arrested and is facing multiple charges related to the attack.
Police say that on Wednesday, it was the site of an attack on a Jewish woman in her 70s. So police say that the woman entered the store around 1:35 in the afternoon along with a friend and was approached and was stabbed. Police say that people who were there came to her aid, and as of yesterday, she was still receiving medical attention. But police have said that they do not believe a woman in her 70s and the alleged attacker knew each other. So they have now charged 71-year-old Joseph Rook of Cornwall with aggravated assault and also possessing a dangerous weapon. And this particular Loblaws location that we've been looking at footage of here is known for having a large kosher food section. A little bit earlier on, the mayor said that he has had the chance to speak with this woman in her 70s. Here's a little bit more of what we heard from Mayor Mark Sutcliffe.
I feel upset because this isn't Ottawa. We have to recommit to treating each other, to treating everyone with kindness. The situation is not going to improve unless each and every one of us commits to the path of kindness and compassion and respect.
We've also heard from the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and in a post on social media earlier today, he said this: the senseless attack on a Jewish woman in a grocery store this week is deeply disturbing. My thoughts are with her, her family, and Ottawa's Jewish community. And also saying here that he supports law enforcement as they work to swiftly bring the perpetrator to justice. We've also heard from the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, also on social media, putting out a statement that says in part, quote, I am outraged by yet another vile anti-Semitic attack, this time at a grocery store in Ottawa. Targeting people because they are Jewish is disgusting, un-Canadian, and must be met with the full force of the law.
We are learning disturbing new details tonight about yesterday's stabbing at a grocery store in the city's West End. A 71-year-old man is facing charges after allegedly stabbing an elderly Jewish woman who was shopping inside, and police now say the attack was unprovoked. This happened at the Loblaws at College Square in broad daylight yesterday afternoon. CTV's Natalie Van Roy joins us in studio with the details. Natalie.
Patricia, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs says the victim is a valued member of the Ottawa Jewish community. The police hate and bias crime unit is involved in the investigation, though it's not yet known if this was a hate-motivated attack. Police say the woman, who is in her 70s, entered the Loblaws store with a friend around 1:30 yesterday afternoon when she was approached by a man who allegedly stabbed her, leaving her with serious injuries. Store staff rushed to help the woman, who was in the produce section near the front entrance of the store. Emergency responders arrived shortly after, and the suspect was arrested at the scene.
Investigators have confirmed that the victim and suspect were not known to each other prior to this incident. And by all statements that we have so far, there was nothing that would have provoked this. It was entirely unprovoked, as the woman was just going about doing her shopping.
The 71-year-old suspect was charged with aggravated assault and possession of a dangerous weapon.
Thank you.
We can disagree in this party and still be unified.
And as a result, I'm going to ask us to withdraw this resolution.
Democratic National Committee Chairman Ken Martin retracted a pro-Israel resolution that easily passed committee after a conflicting resolution that called to recognize a state of Palestine failed. The about-face reflects the divisions on display at the DNC summer meeting between Democrats.
Now, I know that there are some who are interested in making changes today. But as we've seen, there's divide in our party on this issue.
The Democratic Party has struggled to reconcile different factions' responses to the Israel-Hamas war. Martin proposed Resolution 3, Resolution for Humanitarian Aid to Gaza and the End to the Israel-Hamas War. Resolution 18 also called for an immediate ceasefire, but it went further than Martin's resolution and called for an arms embargo on Israel and the suspension of military aid. Establishment Democrats have long supported Israel, while those further to the left have long pushed to end U.S. aid for Israel, pointing to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. What comes next for the DNC on Gaza remains to be seen after Martin's retraction.
We begin with 7 people arrested in Redmond after they forced their way inside Microsoft's executives building in Redmond. This, the latest in a series of demonstrations over the company's Azure platform and its usage in the Middle East. Fox 13's Jennifer Dowling has the latest.
The president says that the company respects the freedom of expression and says that it is lawful. He says that people can protest at the transit center down the street because it is a public space. However, he says occupying an office as well as vandalism is not lawful.
The People's Court summons Bradford Lee Smith.
Today, protesters occupied the office of Brad Smith, Microsoft vice chairman and president.
We are not leaving until you are forced to confront the crimes that you are enabling.
They unfurled a banner to pay tribute to a software engineer killed in Gaza. And according to the group No Azure for Apartheid, who shared these videos with us, current and former tech workers from Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and more were part of the occupation.
I'm Vanya, a former Microsoft worker.
That group says they were doing it to protest Microsoft's role in, quote, powering the genocide in Gaza and the mass surveillance of Palestinians.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
They said they were presenting demands to the executives at their place of work as a direct escalation to show that worker pressure has reached a tipping point.
We're here to deliver our demands.
Microsoft says 7 people were taken into custody by Redmond police. Of those, 2 were Microsoft employees.
Obviously, this was an unusual day.
After the arrests, Smith spoke to us from the office that had been previously occupied.
But obviously, when 7 folks do as they did today, storm a building, occupy an office, lock other people out of the office, plant listening devices even in crude form in the form of telephones, cell phones hidden under couches and behind books, that's not okay. When they're asked to leave and they refuse, that's not okay.
He went on to say the company was investigating claims that the Israeli Defense Forces used Microsoft's Azure cloud computing program to store phone call data obtained through the mass surveillance of Palestinians, specifically looking into claims written in an article in The Guardian.
Some of what they heard turned out to be true, and much of what they reported now needs to be tested.
Tuesday's protest also comes on the heels of multiple days of protests within the last month. Last week, more than 18 people were arrested after red paint was splashed on a Microsoft sign and on the ground. This is security video released by Microsoft showing the previous protests. As for how the protesters got in Tuesday, Smith says they have security footage that's being reviewed.
We did get a report yesterday afternoon from an employee that someone from the activist group No Azure for Apartheid was calling around and seeking a floor plan of this floor. So obviously, one way or another, they figured out how to get in. We'll adapt our security accordingly.
Smith says that the company does not retaliate against employees. As for the 2 Microsoft employees that were arrested, he says they could face termination because he said they were also arrested last week. Meantime, we spoke to a member of the protest group who says that he is working on getting the 7 people who were taken into custody released, and they could have more information on them tomorrow. Reporting for Redmond, Jennifer Dowling, Fox 13 News.
Over the last couple weeks, Microsoft has become the latest target of pro-Palestine protests.
Brad Smith, you're a liar!
Brad Smith, you're a liar!
You set Palestine on fire!
You set Palestine
Palestine on fire!
Tuesday's sit-in was organized by the group No Azure for Apartheid, a reference to a report that the Israeli government has been using Microsoft's cloud storage program.
We are not leaving until you are forced to confront the crimes that you are enabling.
As others protested outside and later moved to public property, 7, including 2 current Microsoft employees, made their way into President Brad Smith's 5th floor office.
We are here to deliver our demands because they have been refusing to answer all of our demands to end their complicity in the genocide in Gaza.
They remained defiant as Redmond police arrived.
That's not okay. When they're asked to leave and they refuse, that's not okay.
Smith addressed the incident in an impromptu press conference hours after the arrests.
We've had to act, and we have and we will. And yet at the same time, I want to be clear, we respect the freedom of expression that everyone in this country enjoys as long as they do it lawfully. If they storm buildings, if they occupy offices, if they create threats to others, that's different.
Smith said the company remains committed to upholding its human rights principles in the Middle East, but also pointed out that they do have to honor certain contractual obligations there. That being said, Smith added that Microsoft is looking into Israel's use of Azure. Live in Redmond, Jim Nelson, King 5 News.
2 Microsoft employees are out of a job after staging a protest in the president's office. We showed you this video last night as current and former employees staged a pro-Palestinian sit-in. 7 protesters were arrested, including those 2 employees. In a statement, the company wrote, quote, "These incidents are inconsistent with the expectations we maintain for our employees." The protest group responded by reiterating its demands for the company to cut ties with Israel.
When I joined this company as a software engineer 5 years ago, I never expected that my employer would have me literally dragged out of my own workplace for taking a stand for ethics and human rights.
Police arrested 25 people in the last 8 days for protesting Microsoft.
Many current and former employees are demanding Microsoft break ties with the Israeli military. Fox 13's AJ Janavel breaks down the last several days of rallies.
Yeah, and we heard from several Microsoft employees who have been fired and arrested at these protests. We dug into what has been going on at that Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington over the last few days.
The People's Court summons Bradford Lee Smith.
Tuesday, police say 7 protesters barricaded themselves inside the office of Microsoft President Brad Smith. The protest group No Azure for Apartheid say they have several demands, including Microsoft cut ties with Israel. Police arrested the 7 inside the president's office for trespassing and resisting arrest. 2 current employees were among the protesters. Microsoft fired them for breaching company policy. Less than a week before this incident, police arrested 18 people for causing chaos on the company's campus in Redmond. Video shows the group arriving outside the Microsoft sign. Microsoft said one of the protesters in this rally was a current employee. 3 others were fired from the company previously for similar conduct.
David and Nia, several of you.
Well, police are still looking for the people responsible for vandalizing the Weizmann National Museum of American Jewish History in Old City on Monday. The museum said this isn't the first time they've been targeted by vandals, and they are not going to let it deter them from fulfilling their mission. Carrie Corrado has our coverage tonight.
Red graffiti can still be seen spray painted over the Israeli flag that's hanging on the Weizmann National Museum of American Jewish History in Old City. The museum says this vandalism that happened early Monday morning is the second incident in 2 weeks. President and CEO of the museum, Dan Tadmore, says appallingly vandalizing Jewish institutions has become a daily occurrence in America. The ADL reported over 9,000 cases of anti-Semitism just this past year. Unfortunately, the Weizmann National Museum of American Jewish History has become part of that statistic. He says ahead of the 2-year commemoration of October 7th, they will be swapping their flag with a sign calling for the release of the remaining hostages and have other new exhibitions planned for 2026. In response to the vandalism, the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia says they are saddened and outraged. They say there is no place for this type of hate here in Philadelphia or anywhere in the nation. They said in part an attack on the Weitzman is not only an attack on the Jewish community, but also on the values of education, inclusion, and cultural understanding that strengthen our society. Rabbi Yosef Zarnagian from Congregation Mikveh Israel, which is right down the street, says the silver lining is that these events bring everyone together and makes them stronger.
Unfortunately, we're in a state right now where vandalisms and attacks on the Jewish people, both here in Philadelphia and unfortunately across the world right now, are both disheartening and terrifying, but at the same time not shocking.
He says his synagogue was vandalized 2 years ago, and he is no stranger to the hate. He says the Weitzman is a place that welcomes everyone and holds a special place in the heart of Philadelphia.
They're walking into one of the most significant displays, one of the most significant cradles of Jewish history and heritage in the United States.
He hopes the hate ends soon.
We simply want peace. We want to live in solidarity with one another. And of course, everybody wants to see an end to this brutal war in the Middle East.
In Old City, Carrie Corrado, CBS News, Philadelphia.
We call upon the students of George Mason University to join us in continuing the fight for Palestinian liberation. We have a moral obligation to carry on the legacy of our noble people, our steadfast prisoners, and our honorable martyrs.
A notorious chapter of an anti-Israel student organization at George Mason University that was suspended last year after officials found guns and terrorist propaganda at the home of 2 of its leaders has reemerged with a chilling recruitment video, just in time for students' return to campus this fall semester. Virginia's George Mason University chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, a national student group with chapters at college campuses across the country, has been all but silent for nearly 10 months, following the chapter's suspension last fall until now. According to GMU's chapter of faculty and staff for the Justice of Palestine, the group is now eligible to reapply as an organization for the 2025 fall semester. On August 24th, the group's Instagram account posted a shocking terrorist-style recruitment video, reminiscent of something that would be put up by ISIS, ominously titled, "We're Back, with Steadfastness and Confrontation, SJP at Mason." The video shows a masked member wearing a keffiyeh to conceal their face, along with a digitally altered voice, calling for students to join their cause. In the clip, the figure pledges that the spirit of resistance will not be quenched until we see full liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. The speaker goes on to slam what they labeled the unjust raid of their, quote, comrades' home just before the chapter suspension last year. Court documents reveal that in November of 2024, Fairfax County Police obtained a search warrant for the home of 2 sisters belonging to the group, Noor and Jenna Chana, one a co-president of the chapter and the other a former leader. According to local publication Fairfax Times, the warrant was obtained after the pair had been linked to pro-Palestinian vandalism on campus. Prosecutors say FBI agents, along with police from Virginia State, Fairfax County, and GMU, found 4 unsecured guns, over 20 magazines, and pro-terrorist propaganda in the home, including Hamas and Hezbollah flags, as well as anti-Semitic armbands with Arabic text reading, "Death to Jews," and "Kill them where they stand," according to the Washington Post. The following day, the 2 sisters were dealt criminal trespass orders by police, barring them from campus for 4 years, which was effectively an expulsion. While authorities say much of what was found in the home was determined to belong to the sisters' father and brother, George Mason University cited the vandalism as enough justification for their actions against the 2 women, according to Fairfax Times. Additionally, the GMU chapter of SJP was placed under an interim suspension order. In April, George Mason University's Student Conduct Board ruled that it would remain suspended for the remainder of the spring semester. Now, as George Mason University students begin their fall semester and SJP is eligible to reapply as an organization, the new unsettling video has cast a spotlight back on the university's troubled history with anti-Semitism. In December of 2024, an 18-year-old freshman at GMU was arrested for allegedly plotting a mass casualty attack on Israel's general consulate in New York City, which he reportedly described as a goldmine of targets. The Egyptian national Abdullah Hassan was caught after instructing an undercover FBI agent posing as a terrorist sympathizer on November 27th to target the consulate with explosives. And in March of this year, GMU was included on a list of over 60 universities by the Department of Education, threatening to have federal funding taken away over anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment on campus. U.S. colleges and universities benefit from enormous public investments funded by U.S. taxpayers. That support is a privilege, and it is contingent on scrupulous adherence to federal anti-discrimination laws. Education Secretary Linda McMahon said in a statement.
International Criminal Court's lead prosecutor Karim Khan has temporarily stepped down until the end of a sexual misconduct investigation into his alleged actions against a junior staff member. Khan informed his staff of his decision amid escalating media reports stating it was to uphold the integrity of the International Criminal Court. Melita Oletenges has the details.
Raise your right hand.
Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court at The Hague, has announced that he is stepping down temporarily as a United Nations investigation into alleged sexual misconduct nears its conclusion, according to a statement from his office on Friday. In a letter to his staff, Khan explained that he had been keeping his position under constant review and that his decision was informed by the need to protect the integrity of the process. Khan, who was served as ICC prosecutor since 2021, is accused of forcing himself on a female assistant in a New York hotel room in December 2023. The incident is being investigated as part of a broader pattern of alleged inappropriate touching, harassment and forced intercourse by Khan against his accuser. The assistant, a Malaysian lawyer in her 30s, alleges that Khan further forced her into sexual intercourse against her will while on missions in New York, Colombia, Congo, Chad, Paris and at his residence in The Hague. Khan is well known in Kenya for his role in defending President William Ruto at the ICC on charges of crimes against humanity following the disputed 2007 elections, representing both President Ruto and journalist Joshua Arap Sang. The prosecutor had denied all allegations of misconduct which were reported to the court's governing body in October last year. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV.
That report by
A new charge of sexual harassment was just brought against this guy by another woman this past week.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is denying and revoking Palestinian officials' visas ahead of the United Nations General Assembly, including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The State Department saying, in quote, "It is in our national security interest to hold the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority accountable for not complying with their commitments and for undermining the prospects for peace." For more, let's bring in Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon.
Representative of the Palestinian people.
Earlier this week, Saudi Arabia and France called on countries at the United Nations to support the declaration.
In a significant move, just weeks before the United Nations General Assembly, the United States has announced it is denying and revoking visas for members of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestine Liberation Organization. The decision, aimed at holding Palestinian leadership accountable for what Washington calls a failure to meet peace commitments, has drawn sharp attention from international observers and Palestinian officials. The announcement was made on August 29th by the U.S. State Department.
In accordance with U.S. law, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is denying and revoking visas from members of the Palestine Liberation Organization, TPLO, and the Palestinian Authority, PA, ahead of the upcoming United Nations General Assembly. The Trump administration has been clear. It is in our national security interest to hold the PLO and PA accountable for not complying with their commitments and for undermining the prospects for peace.
Officials cited multiple reasons for the move, including continued incitement, appeals to international legal bodies, and the fallout from Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel. The State Department further elaborated, stating,
"Before the PLO and PA can be considered partners for peace, they must consistently repudiate terrorism, including the October 7th massacre, and end incitement to terrorism in education, as required by U.S. law and as promised by the PLO. The PA must also end its attempts to bypass negotiations through international lawfare campaigns, including appeals to the ICC and ICJ, and efforts to secure the unilateral recognition of a conjectural Palestinian state. Both steps materially contributed to Hamas's refusal to release its hostages and to the breakdown of the Gaza ceasefire talks."
Despite the restrictions, the Palestinian Authority's mission to the United Nations will remain exempt under the 1947 UN Headquarters Agreement, which ensures access to the UN for diplomatic purposes.
The PA mission to the UN will receive waivers per the UN Headquarters Agreement. The United States remains open to re-engagement that is consistent with our laws should the PA-PLO meet their obligations and demonstrably take concrete steps to return to a constructive path of compromise and peaceful coexistence with the State of Israel.
Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour reacted shortly after the news broke, telling reporters,
"This statement attributed to the State Department was just released. It was brought to my attention just about half an hour ago. We will see exactly what it means and how it applies to any of our delegation, and we will respond accordingly."
Mansour added that President Mahmoud Abbas still plans to attend the UN General Assembly, which includes a scheduled session on Palestinian rights on September 22nd. However, the restrictions could affect whether Abbas or other key Palestinian officials can travel to New York for the event. The visa action follows US sanctions imposed in July against unnamed officials from the PA and PLO. According to CNN, the Biden administration's earlier extension of protections for Palestinian officials is now being reversed by the Trump administration, which is taking a harder stance against Palestinian international advocacy. While the exact list of officials affected by the visa restrictions has not been disclosed, the broader implications are clear. Palestinian representation at the UNGA could be significantly limited at a moment when a growing number of US allies, including the UK, Canada, France and Australia, are moving toward recognizing a Palestinian state. The move has also reignited legal and diplomatic questions surrounding the 1947 UN Headquarters Agreement, which obligates the US as the host country to grant visas for UN business. In the past, Washington has denied access to controversial figures, including former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2013 and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat in 1988. Still, critics point to inconsistencies, noting that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is also wanted by the ICC, is expected to attend this year's UN gathering without obstruction. As world leaders prepare to converge in New York, the United States' decision to restrict visas for Palestinian officials adds a new layer of diplomatic friction to an already complex geopolitical moment.
You have anywhere from 74% to 97% of neighborhoods in those.
You know what happened this past week in Minnesota with that transgender maniac. So here's just a little piece of it. On top of everything else in his mass shooting at the church, turns out he's also anti-Semitic.
Shots were like right next to me. My friend got hit in the back.
Did he go to the hospital?
Yeah, he went to the hospital.
And I heard something like really loud, like I thought it was fireworks in the church. And then I saw the shooting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. Me and my friend Cece were just praying.
The shooter died by suicide in the parking lot and is identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, formerly Robert Westman, who legally changed his name in 2020 to be identified as female. The suspect reportedly attended the school and his mother worked at the church.
The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible.
The FBI is investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. Social media posts authorities believe made by the shooter also reveal a hatred of Jews and
Always
President
Jews.
Trump.
Always
We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.
Yeah, you can cut it. Cut it. יופי. מעולה.
And now we're going to start winding down with 2 or 3 very upbeat stories and stuff.
שמש החמה פגשנו הבוקר קבוצה של אנשים שלא נתנו לאבק ולזיעה לשבור אותם.
Only this pair of scissors here?
Yeah.
הם באו למטולה כדי להשיב חיים למלונית בית שלום שעומדת שוממה מאז אוקטובר 2023.
אנחנו נבוא עם המריצה ועם הדליים, נמלא את הקדים ונשפוך גם בין האלה והכל יהיה בסדר.
קבוצה של כמה עשרות מתנדבים מגרמניה, בני 16 עד 70, מראה שאפשר גם אחרת.
Why I'm doing this? Because I love the people of Israel. I love Israel. And we want to come and say, like, we want to stand with you. Israel, you are not alone.
מדי יום מתפרסמות תקריות אנטישמיות. הם באו כדי לומר לנו, לא כל העולם נגדכם.
Some of them I can convince. Somebody from my town told me, I'm sorry Fritz, you are not balanced. You only see the Israeli side. If it means to be balanced, to understand the terrorists who killed babies, who killed families, who burned the houses, then I'm decided not more to be balanced. At any price, if I'm losing friends, I decide not to be balanced. If to be balanced means to have sympathy for terrorists.
חלקם נמנים על קהילה שנפגשת מדי יום ראשון, פועלת למען ישראל וקוראת להשבת החטופים.
Sometimes they got attacked, but they know that they might get attacked again. But that's not their focus. Their focus is that it's important to stand with Israel and that they want to do it. So they do it.
Wir müssen berichten. Über das, über was kaum berichtet wurde. Über das, was relativiert, vereinfacht oder geleugnet wird.
זוכרים את שרה מריה סנדר? לפני כמה חודשים סיפר דוב גילהר על הגרמניה שהייתה בצפון במלחמה ומסבירה ברשת למען ישראל.
In Germany, it was like nobody was talking about it. All eyes were on Gaza, obviously, but nobody was talking about the north, nobody was talking about Hezbollah.
מסתבר שהפעילות שלה מכה גלים.
She came here during the war and she was showing us how it looked like here. I saw her and I thought, like, I want to come to these people, to those who suffered so much.
בימים האחרונים הם הכינו בשר על האש לחיילים. מי שעמד מעל המנגל הוא פריץ, שסבו הכין בשר על האש לחיילי אס-אס. כאן הוא סוגר מעגל.
Not just to be here like I was here to speak with the people and to take their time, but to help them to build up and to clean up, and then is a benefit of all.
לא רק המעגל שלו נסגר, גם של מרים בעלת המקום, שהכינה תצוגה לזכר משפחתה שנספתה בשואה.
And this is my mother's side. After she died, I found a box with pictures from my mother from the war.
So this is what I want to tell you. It's all, wars are terrible, but it's all about people. Yes. And we are able to fix in our little ways, and you are here to fix. And it's so nice to have you here.
You close the circle. So it's making good for both of sides.
אנחנו נמצאים בחפירות הרחוב המדורג שמנהלת רשות העתיקות בגן הלאומי סובב חומות ירושלים. בחפירות שלנו, בעיר דוד, חשפנו ממצא קטן, יומיומי, אבל המיקום שלו והסיפור שעומד מאחוריו היה מיוחד מאוד.
One day I got a nice phone call from Nachshon saying that he has a little piece with inscription, broken piece probably of a lead of an ossuary.
כתובת למעשה שיכול להיות שהיא קבלה, או יכול להיות שהיא רישום של איזשהו תהליך מסחרי שהיא תיעדה, נמצאת כאן במרחב של הכיכר.
On it we have 7 lines, the beginning and end are missing, but it records an end of a name, Shimon, which is one of the most popular name of Second Temple period, with a Mem and Resh, which are a beginning of Ma'at and Reva, which are coinage. It is probably documenting a list of names with numbers. Maybe the guy who wrote it quickly, incising it into this piece of stone, was recording payment for his workers, or maybe a list of things that people owe him money.
יוסף בן מתתיהו מתאר את ירושלים, מתאר את השוק העליון. כיוון שאנחנו נמצאים בעיר התחתונה, אנחנו מניחים שיתקיים גם שוק תחתון. וכאן, כשאנחנו עומדים ברחבה של העיר התחתונה, ורואים את הצומת החשובה הזו שהובילה את עולי הרגל בימות הרגלים, אבל הייתה צומת מאוד מאוד חשובה בימי השגרה, ואנחנו שמים את הכתובת הזאת שמעידה על פעילות מסחרית ביחד עם משקולות אבל ששימשו במסחר העירוני, וביחד עם שבר של שולחן מידה שפורסם לא מזמן. אנחנו בעצם מתחילים לקבל עדויות ארכיאולוגיות שמקיפות גם מבחינת הממצא הקטן את המרחב של הכיכר, ושופכות אור על הפעילות המסחרית שהתקיימה כאן.
It can be dated to the 1st century BCE or 1st century CE, written in cursive Jewish script, resembling other inscriptions of that period, but this is the only one found in Jerusalem. So we have a nice regard from Second Temple period.
Of him. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend, and as I said at the outset, we will not be meeting on Tuesday and Thursday as I continue working my way through my first time testing positive for COVID, and since the lung transplant. And then we will meet, God willing, next Sunday, and by the weekend it will have been 14 days since I tested positive, so God willing. So we won't meet Tuesday, Thursday. Emails will go out to that effect. We will, God willing, meet next Sunday. We'll be sending out the annual membership renewal information as we start approaching Rosh Hashanah. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Be well, and thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.